Hi everybody, it's Honest John again. When Bernie Sanders entered the Democratic presidential campaign, I was excited. I even did a fundraiser for him. I loved the ideas he was talking about. Income inequality, the minimum wage, free college education, even though I knew that was kind of a pipe dream. But he forced Hillary Clinton to take on these issues. And he managed to win enough caucuses and primaries to throw a scare into the Clinton campaign. But she never did lose her lead. And when the Big East primary was held, Bernie was only able to get tiny little Rhode Island, my old home state, by the way. He was soundly beaten in the biggest states, New York and Pennsylvania in particular. And so Hillary has built up an insurmountable lead in the pledged delegates. As a matter of fact, her lead is much bigger over Bernie than Barack Obama's lead was over her when she conceded to him. Now, up until then, Bernie had been talking about the will of the people and how not making him the nominee would thwart the will of the people. But then he changed his tune and began trying to convince the superdelegates to come over to him. Now it doesn't seem to matter that Hillary Clinton has 3 million more people that voted for her and more pledged delegates. It's the will of the people be damned. And at first, Bernie was focused on the issues. And the Democratic debates were vigorous, passionate, sharp, and full of substance. A huge contrast from the Republican debates, which consisted mainly of name-calling and rolling around in the mud with Donald Trump. But as Sanders' hopes have faded, instead of seeking party unity and becoming more conciliatory, his attacks on Clinton and on the Democratic Party have become sharper and more strident. He hasn't descended into the gutter like Trump, but his attacks seem to reflect his frustration and perhaps his despair. And that stridency has affected his supporters. In Nevada, the Sanders campaign, the Sanders representatives in there tried to cheat. They tried to get 54 people accepted as delegates to the state convention who were not Democrats. They were not registered Democrats. They could have been independents. They could have been Republicans for all we know. But they were not registered Democrats. And Christine Kamar, a Sanders supporter, got caught stealing data from the Clinton campaign, which is the second time that the Sanders campaign has been involved in stuff like that. They also pushed through a rule change which allowed Sanders to win 3 delegates to the national convention that he did not earn. And yet is the Sanders campaign that is accusing the Clinton campaign of cheating. The exact opposite is true. And in addition to all that, the Culinary Workers Union number 216 reports that the Sanders campaign staffers masqueraded as union members in order to mislead members of that union and to gain improper access to them in the workplace. And Sanders, when confronted with the fact that his supporters rioted at the Nevada convention, made a mealy-mouthed statement talking about violence on both sides. But there was no violence on both sides. There was only violence from Sanders supporters, and he hasn't condemned it, and he hasn't told them to stop. And because of that, there are now threats of violence against the Democratic convention in Wyoming. Democratic officials there have received threats from Sanders supporters. There has been vandalism. And Sanders has not stepped up and told them to stop. And despite all that, the DNC met with Sanders and granted him 5 members on the Rules Committee, which they didn't have to do. But not being satisfied with that, Bernie has sent a letter to the DNC threatening to disrupt the Democratic Convention, the National Convention, unless the Democrats remove Governor Mike Malloy and Barney Frank, both lifelong Democrats, unlike Sanders, from the Rules Committee. So I think it's time for the DNC to put its foot down. Sanders has not won anything. He doesn't have the right to act like the boss. Maybe they should make a few threats of their own. Maybe remove a few of Sanders' supporters from various committees. All of the excitement that I had for Sanders is gone. He looks to me like another politician who is willing to cheat to get what he wants. So last week, when the time came for me to mail in my ballot for the Democratic primary here in California, I filled in the circle next to Hillary Clinton's name. And I sent it in because I'm done with Sanders. Thanks for listening.